Good afternoon. Today's presentation is on circles. We are looking at restorative practices and the implementation of circles. First, I would like to say that it is really important to ensure that you have had some kind of introduction to restorative practices prior to implementing circles. There is a lot of theory-based information that is necessary in order to ensure that staff are conscientious about the implementation of restorative practices and using circles effectively. So I would not try implementation of circles without having some kind of background about restorative practices. So this is kind of a part two of a 2-day training that focuses on specifically the implementation of using circles in our school communities. Restorative circles are an opportunity to do a lot of things, but most importantly, when we think about the aim of restorative practices, we're thinking about building community 80% of the time and then resolving conflict. So when I think about how I would use restorative circles as a principal, I use it a lot proactively in homeroom time, giving opportunities for teachers to have a specific process that they can use to really build their staff's ability to make and create relationships with students and to build trust. But here are some reasons that a circle may be used in a classroom or in a school setting. Number one, it's a structure for dialogue. As we think about teachers and building their capacity and ensuring that they have something that they can use, a circle is definitely a structure that will allow them a consistent, safe space for dialogue. It also responds to our aim of restorative practices about building community, and we should be working on doing that. And so, leaders, you have to find time for students to be able to do this with their students, their teachers, I'm sorry. So, it also builds and creates connections. As you listen to answers or responses from your classmates that perhaps you never talked to, you are able to really create connections with them. And even as our teachers take risk and become vulnerable as they share a little bit about themselves, students are also able to make connections with them. It includes all voices. Now, of course, you want to have an opportunity for students or staff to be able to pass if you're working with staff members on a circle. You want to really include all voices, but we have to understand that sometimes people are resistant, and we really look at that as fear more so than not wanting to participate. So how you design your questions and the prompts that you come up with is really important because you want to make sure that you have questions that are going to allow for all voices to be heard. A circle is fair and it's equitable. It gives opportunity, if wanted, for everyone to participate. And just the fact that you're in a circle and everyone can see everyone, it makes it kind of fair. You're on the same playing field. You're not standing in the front of the classroom while students are seated. And so equity and fair is all what we think of when we think about why circles and helping to build community. Now, circles can be proactive, and I encourage you, again, if you're using circles at all in your community, hopefully most of them are proactive uses. Getting to know you, academic content review, interpersonal skill building, social emotional development. And then you can also do responsive circles where you would be maybe responding. I have a lesson plan that looks at the substitute teacher and the questions that are asked to students prior to sharing what maybe you have heard from a substitute. They also can include topics that are personal, academic, obviously, and work related if you're thinking about using them with staff or even parents. I've done circles as a principal after having a few incidents in our school community. I would bring parents in and sit down and have a circle and talk about the things, guided, of course, and structured. So I encourage circles for many reasons. when you can conduct circles, getting to know students, obviously in the beginning of the year. If you have school ambassadors or student ambassadors that help welcome new students into your building, you can use a circle for that with a counselor maybe or an administrator. You can use it for problem solving. A lot of times our counselors and our administrators are overwhelmed with the number of issues that arise, and we try to problem solve. But the thing about restorative practice is it really puts the accountability on those that have been impacted. And so when we try to problem solve for students for something that they have caused, it doesn't really empower them to be really good problem solvers. And so I love restorative practices because it allows us to help them problem solve. And we're modeling good conflict resolution skills. It can be used as a summarizer. A lot of times we want to check in or do a exit ticket at the end of a lesson. So summarizing is another good opportunity for using circles. Also as an activator, as a check-in is another good reason. It can be used to assess or evaluate your lesson or evaluate feedback from staff if you're doing it at a staff meeting. It can be used as a class reflection. Say you have a teacher cover your class and you want to know from the students, from their perspective, how things went. And so a circle is a really good time. They don't have to be super long. You can do a 15 to 30-minute circle. The key is the kind of prompts. Are you asking an open-ended question or are you asking a one-word or two-word prompt? And you really have to learn to facilitate when you are doing circles. It is high support, high structure. I know a lot of people believe that restorative practices is really kind of a soft. It is not at all. It is high support and high structure. And so whether it's a classroom incident discussion, whether you're teaching curriculum in FCPS, we're looking at the past curriculum where we're teaching social emotional learning concepts to everyone in grades K to 2 in all of our schools. We're really excited about that. We are always implementing research-based strategies, and PATH seems to be one that has acquired much success across the country. So we're using that for our elementary learners, and we're looking at options for middle and high. Circles can also be used to create norms. It can be used for teaching, checking for understanding, and of course, community building. And so this PowerPoint includes lots of examples of circle prompts from low risk, where you ask things like, favorite vacation spot if you were to be able to travel, compared to a high risk prompt like, what is your biggest fear? And so you want to make sure you know your audience and select the right questions for the right group. And so I can't emphasize enough how you have to get in the mindset that you are still facilitating. It is easier to be a participant than it is to be a facilitator of a circle. So first thing you have to think about is, how can I set up my circle? Do I have tables that prevent me from making a circle that has nothing in the middle? If so, make it happen. I have been a science teacher, and in a science classroom using circles, we would do circles around the tables because they're not as mobile. Looking at circles in a classroom where you have space and you can move chairs, by all means. Elementary, maybe you're on the carpet with students in a circle. Middle school, maybe you have them move the desk and you make a circle. But the shape of the circle, I would not say is as important as the process. And so looking at the process, you want to identify a topic. What is your purpose? What will be your outcome or your objectives for this particular circle? And then you want to be very intentional about your prompts. Consider high risk, low risk, new group, or do I really already have a trusting relationship with these students or staff members? And I can really dig deep. And so being intentional about your questions are important. You also want to think past, present, and future. When we think restorative, we are thinking reflection. So maybe you start with questions that elicit thought about things in the past, and then things presently going on, and then help them to help you by empowering them to give suggestions about the future as well. And you also want to participate and model. Sometimes when you're doing a circle, you want to be the first to speak, depending on background knowledge or topic. Sometimes you want to be the last to speak, as you want to really hear before you give input. It's important to have a talking piece. When I do my trainings as a licensed trainer for the International Institute of Restorative Practice, I seldomly use, or frequently use, I should say, the world globe talking piece, kind of a soft, squishy ball of the world. And that is because across the country we have trainers in the International Institute of Restorative Practices who use the same kind of a scripted approach to implement and train others on restorative practices. But for you as a school leader or as a classroom teacher or as a support staff, think about something personal to you that you might want to use that represents maybe your school motto or something about yourself if you're working with small groups of students. But it should be something that can safely be tossed if you have a large group, or rolled if you're not athletic like me. It also could be something if you're in a smaller group that is just able to be passed. But you do want to make sure when you have those large energetic groups that you have something squishy. Also something that can be squeezed, and for those students who may get nervous when they're talking, or adults, something that's tactile. So our guidelines, you want to always create norms. These norms on the screen have been shared, and I found these in many different places as guidelines. But respect the talking piece, speak from the heart, share just enough, listen with respect, remain in the circle, and honor confidentiality. All these really frame the importance of what it means to be in a circle. I suggest that you define what respect looks like, sharing, confidentiality, or create your own norms for your class environment. So when you begin a circle, you want to introduce the circle, the topic, the reason. I always like to start with a prompt that is kind of a check-in first, and maybe I'll ask, how is everyone feeling right now? Do one word to tell me how you're feeling right now. Then I do something that's going to build community. So something like, what was the most exciting thing that you did that you could share school related with us in the circle yesterday or over the last 2 weeks? So, and then we go right into the content. So if I'm talking about a circle, talking about classroom norms, we may start about what has been some norms or expectations that teachers had for you that maybe you had difficulty following. What have been some expectations that you had no problem following? What type of expectations do we need for our classroom? So if you're an art teacher, for art, if you're a music teacher, if you're a PE teacher, have them share some ideas for expectations first. And then in the future, if you're midway in your semester and thinking about going forward, you might want to talk about things that happened first quarter and first term, and maybe what we can do moving forward. So past, present, and future is a really good guide to thinking about how you will create your circle prompts and your questions. Always start again with community building first and a check-in, and then go right into your questions. And finally, at the end of your circle, you want to close out. You want to, as the facilitator, kind of summarize the things that you've talked about and what you've heard, and maybe ask for some final thoughts, and then do a quick exit circle or a closing prompt to kind of assess what you've discussed and everyone's perspective on that. And so maybe as a last question for the norms, so we've heard a lot of things. What's one commitment that you're going to make as we continue to strengthen our classroom community? So here are some examples of some low-risk circle questions. How many siblings do you have? It's a good one. Describe your favorite vacation is one that I want to point out because some students may not have had an opportunity to go on a vacation. So you can rephrase that. If you were to go on vacation, would it be, and maybe give some options, a cold place, a warm place, or some place that allows you to have different activities? And so giving and understanding and knowing your students is really important when you select questions. And sometimes even our low risk questions require some intentional planning on how we seek answers, and multiple choices sometimes necessary. So think about, where your circle would be, who you would be doing circles with, and what your classroom circle would look like. Think about your talking piece, share with colleagues that have done restorative circles already, and please feel free to ask me any questions as well. So I am excited about you trying circles, and I look forward. I do need some footage of circles in action. I have a lot of videos that I'm finding, but I really want to have some personal videos based on people that I've trained and supported. And so if you have videos that you want to share or you come across them, please feel free to send them to me. This video collection has videos in different places. The first one, the second one actually is one that I really appreciated. I found on the internet about academic circles from the perspective of a high school literacy specialist, which I thought was amazing because when we think about circles, a lot of time parents and even staff members consider them just community building. But this second video highlights it being conducted in a high school literacy class, high stakes academics. And so I think that for me, restorative practices is about building community because I feel like you have to have relationships before they even trust you to teach and learn from you. But I also think that academics is a priority for me and for every educator. And so we have to make sure we are embedded in even embedding this process even in our learning with students because they like to learn. They are listeners more so than we are sometimes, but they also need to be able to communicate to really make those connections if you think about our brain research. So I've tried to include resources from every level. There are many of websites. If you go out and search circles, or Morningside Center is a really good website that I found that shows some of our circle processes in various proactive and responsive videos. So search, have fun with it, be restorative in your thinking, and I wish you the best of luck with all that you do restoratively.